Have you ever sat through Christmas dinner while your mother mocked you for playing on a laptop like a failure? I swallowed that humiliation for years until a single notification turned the dining room into a courtroom. The worst part was not that they discovered I had over $14 million sitting in my account. The horror was how fast they decided that money actually belonged to them. My name is Brianna Hayes, and according to the internal monologue I have been running for the last decade, I am a 35-year-old financial analyst specializing in high-risk fintech valuation. But if you were to ask the woman sitting at the head of the table in this cramped dining room in Ridgeport, New Jersey, I am simply Brianna, the daughter who never quite grew up, the one who spends her days clicking buttons on a computer for pocket change while the adults do the real work. The air in my mother's house always smelled the same on Christmas. It was a mixture of pine-scented aerosol spray, overcooked roast beef, and the distinct metallic scent of judgment. I adjusted the napkin on my lap, smoothing out a wrinkle that did not exist. I had bought these napkins. I had also bought the roast beef. The 3 bottles of red wine that my Uncle Jerry was currently draining with impressive speed, and the garland draped across the mantel. I had coordinated the delivery of the catering from a high-end bistro in the next town over, because my mother, Marla Hayes, had called me 3 weeks ago weeping about her arthritis and how she just could not manage the kitchen this year. I had spent 2 hours on the phone arranging the menu, paid the invoice, which amounted to nearly $800, and tipped the driver $50 to bring everything inside and set it up. "This beef is tender, Marla," Aunt Carol said, sawing into a slice with aggressive enthusiasm. "You really outdid yourself this year. I know how expensive meat has gotten." I waited. It was a reflex, waiting for the truth. Marla waved a hand dismissively, her gold bracelets jingling. They were a birthday gift from me 2 years ago, though she told everyone she bought them at an estate sale. "Oh, you know me. Carol, I sacrifice. I scoured the ads for weeks. Brianna helped me pick it up. But I told her, you have to know how to hunt for the deals. This girl, she would just pay full price if I didn't watch her." I took a sip of water. It was warm. "Actually, Mom, the catering company delivered it at 4 o'clock, remember? I texted you the tracking link." Marla let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind that invited everyone else to join in on the joke I clearly did not understand. "Listen to her. Tracking links. Everything is digital with this one." I tell her, "Brianna, the butcher on Main Street knows my name. That is how you get the good cuts. Not by clicking a mouse." Across the table, my brother Logan snorted. He was 32, 3 years younger than me, and possessed the kind of effortless, unearned confidence that usually accompanies mediocre white men who have never faced a consequence in their lives. He was wearing a jersey that cost more than my first car, and he was currently checking his phone under the table. I knew exactly what he was looking at. The Knicks game had started at noon, and knowing Logan, he had money on the point spread. "Leave her alone, Mom," Logan said, though his grin was wide and predatory. Not everyone can handle the real world. Some people need to hide behind a screen. "Hey, Bree, how's what do you call it? The data entry going?" "It is financial analysis, Logan," I said, keeping my voice level. "I manage investment portfolios for private equity firms." Right, Logan said, winking at Uncle Jerry. "Crypto, right? Magic internet money. I got a buddy who lost his house on that stuff. Be careful. Bree, don't want you moving back into your old room." The table erupted in laughter. It was a physical blow. That sound. It pushed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I looked around the table at my family. These were people who still wrote checks at the grocery store. They were people who thought a savings account with 0.1% interest was a solid investment strategy. They had no idea that the laptop sitting in my bag in the hallway contained access to a ledger that could buy this entire neighborhood 3 times over. "I am doing just fine. Logan," I said, "how is the job search coming? Did that dealership in Trenton call you back?" The laughter died instantly. "You could attack Brianna, but you did not touch Logan. He was the golden boy, the star quarterback of a high school team from 15 years ago. the one who just needed a lucky break. Marla slammed her fork down, the noise cracking through the tension like a whip. Brianna, do not be nasty. Your brother is exploring his options. He has ambition. He is not afraid to get his hands dirty, unlike some people who think work means sitting in pajamas all day. I am wearing a silk blouse, Mom, I said, gesturing to my outfit. And I work 60 hours a week. Doing what? Marla challenged, her eyes narrowing. Explain it to me. Brianna, explain it to Aunt Carol. Because every time I ask, you give me these big words, analytics, fintech. It sounds like made-up nonsense to avoid getting a real job with benefits. You are 35 years old. When I was your age, I was working double shifts at the diner to keep a roof over your head after your father died. I did not have time to play on a computer. There it was, the trump card, the widow's sacrifice. It did not matter that I had paid off the mortgage on this house 5 years ago. I had done it anonymously, funneling the money through a lawyer so she would think it was an insurance settlement from Dad's old policy finally paying out. I knew if I gave it to her directly, she would have given it to Logan, and Logan would have given it to a bookie in Atlantic City. I have benefits, Mom, I said quietly. I have excellent insurance. Obamacare doesn't count, Logan muttered, shoving a dinner roll into his mouth. It is private insurance, I corrected, but nobody was listening anymore. They were passing the potatoes, moving on. The sport of baiting Brianna finished for the moment. I looked down at my plate. I had lost my appetite. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 in the evening. The Asian markets were opening in 45 minutes, but there was a pre-market volatility report on a specific merger I had been tracking for 6 months. My firm, Northridge Venture Studio, had a significant position in a startup that was being acquired by a banking giant in Tokyo. If the regulatory approval news broke tonight, the valuation would skyrocket. If it was blocked, I needed to hedge immediately. I needed 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of silence to check the dashboard. I am going to clear the table, I said, standing up. Leave it, Marla said, waving a hand. Go check your little computer. I can see you twitching. You have been staring at your watch for 10 minutes. It is rude. Brianna, it is Christmas. I just need to handle one thing. Mom, it is time sensitive. Of course it is, Logan laughed. The level 10 boss fight is starting, right? Go, Marla said, turning her back to me to pour more wine for Carol. Go play. We will clean up, since you paid for the food. Oh, excuse me. Since you found the coupon, I guess you think you are exempt from the work. I did not argue. I did not point out that I had spent the last 3 hours setting the table while she smoked cigarettes on the back porch. I just walked away. I grabbed my bag from the hallway console table and went into the living room. It was separated from the dining room by a thin wall and a wide archway, so I could still hear every clink of silverware and every burst of laughter. I sat on the beige sofa, the one with the sagging cushions I had offered to replace last year, only to be told that I was trying to erase my father's memory because he used to nap on it. I pulled out my laptop. It was a sleek, nondescript machine. No stickers, no logos, just high-performance hardware encased in matte black metal. I opened it and placed it on my knees. The login screen greeted me. I typed in my password, a 30-character string that I had memorized, followed by a biometric scan of my thumb. The screen flickered, and then the dashboard loaded. The numbers washed over me like a cold, cleansing rain. This was my world. Here, effort equaled result. Here, logic dictated outcome. There was no gaslighting in the code. I navigated to my personal asset overview. The merger news had leaked early. I could see the spike on the graph, a beautiful vertical green line shooting upward like a rocket. My portfolio, which I kept entirely separate from the family's knowledge, had adjusted in real time. I stared at the total equity figure in the top right corner. $14,082,415.12. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. $14 million. It was enough to leave. It was enough to move to a penthouse in the city, to block these numbers, to never smell this stale pine air again. It was freedom. rendered in pixels. "Hey, where's the dessert?" Logan's voice boomed from the dining room, closer than I expected. Panic, irrational and sharp, spiked in my chest. I was not doing anything wrong. This was my money, earned with my brain and my risk tolerance. But in this house, possession was a fluid concept. If Marla knew I had $500, she needed $300 for a bill. If Logan knew I had $1,000, he needed $2,000 for a guaranteed investment. If they saw this number, they would consume me. "I am coming," I yelled back. "Just a second." I moved my cursor to the top corner to close the window. My finger hovered over the trackpad. "Brianna, don't be antisocial," Marla shouted. I flinched. My finger slipped. Instead of hitting sign out, I minimized the window. Then, hearing heavy footsteps approaching the archway, I hastily slammed the laptop lid shut. Or I thought I did. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, and turned toward the dining room. I smoothed my skirt again. I needed to get through dessert. Just pie and coffee. Then I could say I had an early meeting and drive back to my quiet, empty apartment where nobody mocked me. I walked back into the dining room. "I am here," I said, forcing a smile. "I will get the pie. It is in the kitchen." "Finally," Logan said. He was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth. "I was about to come drag you out." I went into the kitchen to slice the pie. It was apple, Marla's favorite, though she would complain the crust was too dry. I focused on the knife, cutting clean, triangular wedges, 1 slice, 2 slices. From the living room, I heard a sound. It was the distinctive electronic chime of my laptop waking up. My blood ran cold. I had not shut the lid all the way. I must have let it drop, but the hinge had caught, or maybe a cushion had stopped it. It was in sleep mode, set to wake on disturbance. "I'm gonna find the remote." Logan's voice drifted from the living room. "Turn the game on." "Logan, no," I whispered, dropping the knife. "Hey, Bree, your computer is still on," Logan shouted. "You left it open." I ran. I did not walk. I scrambled out of the kitchen, slipping slightly on the rug, my pulse roaring in my ears like a jet engine. "Logan, don't touch it!" I reached the archway just in time to see him. He had sat down on the sofa. The laptop was open on his lap. The screen was bright in the dim living room. The dashboard was still there. The green graph. The total equity. $14,082,415. Logan sat frozen. His mouth was slightly open. The remote control fell from his hand and hit the floor with a plastic clatter. He blinked. Once, twice, he leaned closer to the screen, squinting as if he could not process the commas and the zeros. "Logan," I said, my voice trembling. "Give me the computer." He did not look at me. He looked at the number. Then he looked at the dining room where our mother and the rest of the family were waiting for pie. "Mom," Logan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a terrifying frequency. It was the sound of a predator spotting a wounded animal. "What?" Marla called out. "Did she break the TV?" Logan stood up. He turned the laptop around, holding it like a piece of evidence in a murder trial. His eyes were wide, manic, and filled with a sudden, terrifying calculation. "Mom!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Get in here. You have to see this. Everyone, get in here right now." I stood paralyzed in the doorway. The pie was forgotten. The laughter was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and suffocating. It was the silence before an execution. The stampede that followed my brother's scream was immediate and terrifying. It was not the sound of a family rushing to check on an injury or a fire. It was the sound of a mob. I heard chairs scraping violently against the hardwood floor of the dining room. I heard the heavy thud of Uncle Jerry dropping a wine bottle, the glass shattering. Though nobody stopped to check the damage, they crowded into the small living room, pressing shoulder to shoulder, a wall of bodies blocking the exit. The air suddenly felt very hot, thick with the smell of roast beef and cheap cologne. Logan was still standing in the center of the rug, holding my laptop with both hands. His knuckles were white. He looked like a man who had just pulled a sword from a stone, except his face did not hold the nobility of a king. It held the desperate, starving look of a hyena. "Look," Logan said again, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He tilted the screen toward them. "Just look at that number." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush a person. Aunt Carol adjusted her glasses, squinting. Uncle Jerry wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. My mother pushed her way to the front, her heels clicking sharply on the floorboards. She looked at the screen. Then she blinked, her eyes darting from the total equity figure to the graph, and finally, to me. The number was glowing green against the black background. $14,082,415. It was a number that did not belong in a house where we clipped coupons for detergent. It was a number that did not belong to the daughter who was supposed to be the failure. Marla's face went pale. It was not the pallor of shock. It was the white-hot shade of betrayal. Her lips thinned into a razor-sharp line. She did not look at me with pride. She did not gasp in wonder. She looked at me the way a police officer looks at a suspect who has just been caught with stolen goods. "Where did you get this?" Marla asked. Her voice was low, trembling with a suppressed rage that frightened me more than shouting would have. It was an interrogation. It implied that the money could not possibly be mine. And if it was in my possession, I must have done something wrong to acquire it. Or worse, I had possessed it for a long time and had chosen not to share it. "It is my portfolio, Mom," I said. My voice sounded thin in the crowded room. I took a step forward, reaching for the laptop. "Logan, give it back. It is confidential work data." Logan pulled the computer back, out of my reach. He turned his body, shielding the screen with his shoulder. He tapped the glass with a greasy finger, leaving a smudge right over the commas. "Is this real?" Logan demanded. He looked at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Don't lie to me. Brianna, is this a game? Is this a simulation? Because it says total equity right there. That means cash. That means assets." "It is a valuation," I said, trying to keep the technical terms as a shield. "It is a combination of liquid assets and unrealized gains based on the current market cap of Northridge Venture Studio. It is the company I built." The word hung in the air. Company. For years, they had laughed. They had called it my little online job. They had mimed typing on a keyboard whenever I talked about work. They had envisioned me doing data entry for $5 an hour. Now, the word company recontextualized everything. It transformed me from a delusional girl playing on a laptop into a holding company for $14 million. "You own this?" Uncle Jerry asked. His voice slurred but suddenly respectful. "You are the owner?" "Yes," I said. "I am the founder and majority shareholder." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was physical, palpable. The mockery evaporated. The condescension vanished. But what replaced it was not love. It was not respect. It was a terrifying, naked hunger. I watched the calculation happen in real time. I saw it in my mother's eyes as she did the mental math of what $14 million could buy. I saw it in Logan's posture as he straightened up, realizing that the sister he bullied was suddenly the most important person in his universe. Logan let out a breathless, jagged laugh. $14 million. $14 million. He looked around the room, seeking validation. "Do you know what we could do with that? Do you have any idea?" "Logan, give me the computer," I said, my voice hardening. "I need to close the session. It is a security risk." "Security risk?" Marla snapped. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. The scent of her perfume was overpowering. "The only risk here is that you are going to walk out the door and never tell us. You have been sitting on a gold mine, a literal gold mine, and you let me beg you for money for the catering? You let me worry about the electric bill?" "I pay the electric bill, Mom," I said. "I have paid it for 5 years." "Pennies!" Marla shouted, throwing her hands up. "That is pennies compared to this. You let your brother drive a car that breaks down every month. You let us live like this while you are hoarding millions?" It is not hoarding, I argued, feeling the walls closing in. It is capital. It is reinvested. It is not just money sitting in a vault. Mom, it is tied up in contracts, in startups, in payroll for my employees. But you can get it, Logan interrupted. He was still staring at the screen, obsessed. You can cash out. Look at this button. Liquidity event. That means cash. Bree, I know what that means. He did not know what it meant. Not really. He did not understand tax implications, vesting periods, or market volatility. He just saw a button that promised salvation. If I had just 1% of this, Logan said, his voice taking on a whining, pleading quality that made my skin crawl. Just 1%. Bree, that is what? 140,000? Do you know what I could do with that? I could clear the debts. All of them. I could start fresh. I could finally buy into that franchise deal my buddy told me about. I would be set for life. No, I said. The word came out automatic and cold. What do you mean? No, Marla asked, her face twisted. He is your brother. He is flesh and blood. You are standing there in your designer clothes. Oh, I see it now. I see why you dress like that, telling your brother he has to suffer while you swim in money. I am not swimming in anything, I said, trying to keep my breathing steady. I worked for this, for 10 years. While Logan was betting on football games, I was working until 3 a.m. While you were telling everyone I was a failure, I was building a business. And who fed you? Marla countered, her voice rising to a shriek. Who raised you? Who sacrificed her life so you could go to school? I gave up everything for you, Brianna, everything. And this is how you repay me? By hiding your success? By lying to my face every single day? I looked around at the circle of faces. Aunt Carol was nodding in agreement with my mother. Uncle Jerry looked disappointed in me. They were rewriting history right in front of my eyes. 5 minutes ago, I was the ungrateful daughter who didn't visit enough. Now, I was the stingy tycoon who was starving her poor, devoted family. I never lied, I said. I just didn't tell you the specifics because I knew this would happen. Because you are selfish, Logan spat. He finally looked up from the screen, and the hatred in his eyes was pure. You have always been selfish. You think you are better than us. You think because you went to some fancy school and learned big words that you can look down on us. Well, guess what? You owe us. You owe this family. I don't owe you anything, Logan, I said. You owe us everything, Marla screamed. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. We are a family. We share. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. That is how it works. You cannot just keep $14 million to yourself. It is immoral. It is sick. Logan took a step toward me, the laptop still in his hands. I need $50,000 by Monday, he said. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. I have people looking for me. Bree, bad people. If you have this much, $50,000 is nothing. It is like buying a cup of coffee for you. I am not giving you money for gambling debts, Logan, I said. I told you that last year. I told you that the year before. This is different, Logan yelled, spraying saliva. This isn't your paycheck money. This is lottery money. It is endless. You wouldn't even miss it. It is not endless, I said, and I would miss it because I know where it goes. It goes into a hole that never fills up. Don't you dare talk to him like that, Marla hissed. She shook my arm. He is desperate. Can't you see he is scared? What kind of monster are you? You have the power to save his life with a click of a button, and you are standing there lecturing him about morality? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had mocked my job less than an hour ago. I looked for a single trace of concern for me. I wanted her to ask if I was tired. I wanted her to ask how I managed the stress of handling that much capital. I wanted her to say, I am proud of you, Brianna. But there was nothing. There was only the reflection of the green numbers in her eyes. She did not see a daughter. She saw a winning ticket. She saw a way to buy a new house, a new car. A new life where she could brag to her neighbors about her rich daughter instead of making excuses for her weird one. They did not care that I had built this. They did not care about the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the risk, the years of eating instant noodles in a studio apartment to save capital. They only cared that the harvest was ready, and they wanted to strip the field bare. "Give me the laptop." "Logan," I said quietly. "Now?" "No," Logan said. He clutched it tighter to his chest. "Not until you agree to help. We are not leaving this room until we settle this. You are going to write a check, or you are going to make a transfer. Today, right now." "That is extortion," I said. "It is family," Marla shouted. "It is what family does. We help each other." "You didn't help me," I said. The words tasted like ash. "When I needed tuition money, you bought a big screen TV. When I needed a cosigner for my first apartment, you told me to figure it out. When I started this company and almost went bankrupt in the first year, you mocked me for not having a real job." "That was tough love," Marla cried, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "It was a practiced performance. I was making you strong, and look, it worked. You are rich. I made you rich." The logic was so twisted, so perfectly circular, that I knew I could not win. In her mind, her neglect was the cause of my success. Therefore, my success belonged to her. Logan smirked. He saw that Marla was winning the emotional ground. He moved in for the kill. "I'm not asking for much. Bree, just enough to get clear, and maybe some seed money. I have ideas. I could invest. We could be partners. Hayes and Hayes. Think about it." He was already spending it. He was already redesigning his life with my labor. I looked at the laptop screen, still glowing against his chest. I realized then that I had made a catastrophic error. I had thought that bringing success home would make them respect me. I had thought that if I proved I was worthy, they would stop the jokes. But they didn't want me to be worthy. They wanted me to be useful. And now that they knew exactly how useful I could be, they would never let me go. The dining room had ceased to be a place of celebration. It had become a cage, and the lions were circling, hungry and smelling blood. This demand for money, this twisted entitlement that filled the room like a noxious gas, was not born in a moment. It did not spring into existence when Logan saw $14 million on a screen. It was a weed that had been watered, pruned, and fertilized every single day of my life for the last 25 years. As I stood there, clutching my elbows, while my mother screamed about family obligations, I was not seeing a 32-year-old man and a 60-year-old woman. I was seeing the ghosts of the cramped apartment on Elm Street, where the lines were drawn the day my father died. I was 10 years old when the accident happened. The details of the crash faded over time, but the architecture of the aftermath remained razor-sharp. We moved from a modest house to a 2-bedroom apartment in Ridgeport that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. My father had been the gravity that held the family in orbit. Without him, we spun out into the cold, but we did not spin equally. Marla coped by checking out. She retreated into a fog of grief and daytime television, leaving the mechanics of survival to whoever was willing to pick them up. And because she decided early on that I was the strong one, the burden fell on me. It was a label she pasted on my forehead like a price tag. "Brianna is so independent," she would tell the neighbors. "She doesn't need anyone." It was a lie. I was a child. I needed everything. But I learned quickly that needing things in the Hayes household was a weakness, and weakness was only allowed for Logan. Logan was 7 then. He was the baby, the boy, the one who looked like Dad. If he cried because there was no cereal, Mom would rush to the store, spending money we did not have on the brand-name sugary flakes he liked. If I mentioned I was hungry, she would sigh, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. "You know how to use the stove. Brianna, don't be helpless." So, I learned. At 11, I stood on a step stool to stir pots of spaghetti sauce, burning my forearms on the metal rim. I learned to separate the whites from the colors in the laundry room down the hall, feeding quarters into the machine while other kids were playing kickball in the lot. I filled out my own permission slips for school. forging her signature because getting her to lift a pen required an hour of cajoling. I became the administrator of our lives because the alternative was chaos. And while I was learning to be a miniature adult, Logan was learning to be a king. His incompetence was treated as a charming personality quirk. If he left his wet towel on the floor, rotting the carpet, Mom would pick it up, tutting softly. "He is just a boy, Brianna. He has a lot on his mind. He is stressed about missing Dad." I missed Dad, too. I missed him with an ache that felt like a hollowed-out cavity in my chest. But my grief was inconvenient, so I was expected to swallow it. Logan's grief was a currency. He spent it to get out of chores, to get extra dessert, to get the new sneakers while I wore the same boots for 3 winters straight. That was when the screens took over his life. Logan did not cope by helping. He coped by escaping into the television. Specifically, sports. It started innocently enough. Just a boy watching baseball. But Mom encouraged it. She bought him the premium cable package even when we were behind on the heating bill. "It keeps him quiet," she would say. "It gives him a passion." I watched that passion curdle into obsession. By the time he was 15, Logan wasn't just watching games. He was tracking spreads. He was glued to his phone, sweating over scores for teams he didn't even like. He would scream at the TV when a player fumbled, a rage that was disproportionate and terrifying. I tried to tell Mom once. I told her I found a notebook under his bed with lists of numbers and names that looked like debts. She looked at me with cold, flat eyes. "Stop being jealous of your brother. Brianna, he has a head for statistics. Maybe he will be a scout one day. Why do you always have to tear him down?" I stopped trying to save him then. I realized that to her, my concern looked like malice. So, I looked for my own escape. I found it in the high school business club. The room was quiet, air-conditioned, and smelled of whiteboard markers and possibility. While Logan was memorizing batting averages, I was learning about compound interest. I discovered the beautiful, impartial logic of finance. Numbers did not play favorites. A spreadsheet did not care if you were the strong one or the sensitive one. If the inputs were correct, the output was guaranteed. It was the only place in my life where the rules were fair. I threw myself into it with the desperation of a drowning swimmer. I took online coding classes at night, huddled under my duvet with a flashlight so I wouldn't wake Mom up. I learned Python. I learned how to build algorithmic trading models using historical data I scraped from free websites. I wasn't just studying. I was building a ladder, rung by rung, to climb out of that pit. The breaking point, the moment my heart finally calcified against them, happened in my senior year. I had entered a statewide competition for young entrepreneurs. I had spent 6 months building a mock business plan for a logistics software company. I had survived 3 rounds of cuts. When the letter came saying I was a finalist and would be presenting at the award ceremony in the state capitol, I actually cried. It was the first time someone outside of my teachers had told me I was worth something. I told Mom a month in advance. I put the date on the fridge calendar in red ink. I reminded her every week. "I will be there, baby," she had said, patting my cheek without looking away from the TV. "We will all be there. We will take the bus up. It is a big day." The morning of the ceremony, I woke up at 5 o'clock. I ironed my only suit, a charcoal gray set I had bought at a thrift store. I practiced my speech in the bathroom mirror until my throat was dry. When I came out to the living room, ready to go, the apartment was silent. Logan's door was open. His bed was empty. Mom's room was empty too. On the kitchen counter, there was a sticky note. Logan won tickets to the playoffs in Philly. Once-in-a-lifetime chance. We had to catch the early train. Good luck with your school thing. We will celebrate later. Love, Mom. I stood there for a long time, holding that yellow square of paper. It wasn't the disappointment that broke me. It was the lack of surprise. Deep down, a part of me had known. Between Brianna's school thing and Logan's playoff game, there was no contest. There never had been. I took the bus to the Capitol alone. I sat on the bus for 2 hours, staring out the window at the gray highway. feeling the tears dry on my face until my skin felt tight and masked. I walked into that auditorium, filled with hundreds of parents holding flowers and cameras. I saw fathers adjusting their sons' ties. I saw mothers hugging their daughters, whispering encouragement. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage. The lights were blindingly bright. I looked out into the darkness of the audience. I knew exactly where they should have been sitting. Row 4, seats 12 and 13. They were empty, two dark voids in a sea of faces. I stood behind the podium, gripping the wood so hard a splinter dug into my thumb. I felt the sharp prick of pain, and it grounded me. In that moment, looking at those empty seats, something inside me died. The little girl who wanted her mother to clap for her, who wanted her brother to say, "Good job," finally let go. I realized then that I was an orphan. I had been an orphan since the day Dad died. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I delivered my speech. I didn't stumble. I didn't shake. I spoke with a cold, terrifying precision. I talked about efficiency, about cutting losses, about maximizing returns. I wasn't just talking about business anymore. I was talking about my life. I won first place. They gave me a plaque and a check for $500. When I got home that night, the apartment was dark. They weren't back yet. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the check. $500. It was more money than I had ever held in my hand. My first instinct, the old instinct, was to buy groceries, to pay the electric bill which was flashing overdue, to buy Logan a souvenir. Then I looked at the sticky note, still sitting on the counter. "Good luck with your school thing." I took the check. I walked to the bank the next morning and opened a custodial account that required 2 signatures, but I forged Mom's again. Just like I had done with the permission slips, I deposited every cent. That $500 was the seed. It was the first grain of sand in the mountain that would eventually become $14 million. When they finally came home the next day, hungover and loud, Mom didn't even ask if I won. She just complained that the train ride was too long and that Logan's team had lost. So the whole trip was a waste. She looked at me, standing there in my kitchen apron, and said, "What's for dinner? We are starving." I looked at her, and I smiled. It was a thin, tight smile. "I made casserole," I said. "I fed them. I washed their clothes. I listened to Logan complain about the referee, but I was gone. The Brianna they knew was just a hologram. The real Brianna was locked inside a vault in my mind, planning, calculating, and waiting. I decided then that my life would be a black operation. They would know nothing. They would see nothing. I would build a fortress of solitude out of money, and I would make sure the walls were so high that they could never climb over them. So now, standing in this living room 15 years later, hearing Logan beg for seed money and Mom scream about sacrifice, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel the urge to help. I felt the splinter in my thumb. I saw the empty seats. I saw the sticky note. And I knew, with the cold certainty of a ledger balancing to zero, that they would never see a single cent of my money, not because I was greedy, but because I had already paid my dues. I had paid them in laundry, in cooking, in silence, and in the lonely spotlight of a stage where nobody clapped for me. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the room, pulling myself back to the present. "You did teach me to be independent. You taught me that if I didn't save myself, nobody else would." Logan scoffed, still clutching the laptop. "Save the drama for your diary. Bree, we are talking about reality here. We are talking about survival." "So am I, Logan," I said softly. "So am I." My escape began with paperwork. While my friends were picking out prom dresses or dreaming about summer road trips, I was sitting at the chipped kitchen table, surrounded by a fortress of tax forms and financial aid applications. I filled out the FAFSA like I was defusing a bomb. One wrong digit, one checked box in the wrong column, and my ticket out of Ridgeport would evaporate. In the background, the television was always blaring, usually competing with the sound of my mother and Logan arguing. Their fights were cyclical, repetitive loops of accusation and denial. Logan would ask for $20 for gas. Mom would say she didn't have it. Logan would remind her that she promised. She would scream that he was bleeding her dry. Then, 20 minutes later, I would hear the clink of keys and the front door slamming, signaling that she had given him the money anyway. I blocked them out. I focused on the boxes. Student income, 0. Parental contribution, 0. I wrote the essays in the middle of the night. I didn't write about my dreams or my passions. I wrote about grit. I packaged my trauma into 500-word narratives that were designed to make admissions officers feel a mix of pity and admiration. I sold my poverty. I commodified my struggle because I knew that was the only currency I had to buy a seat at the table. The acceptance letter from Eastbridge University in Manhattan came on a Tuesday. I didn't scream. I didn't run to show Mom. I just folded the letter, put it in my backpack, and felt a cold, hard knot of satisfaction tighten in my stomach. Eastbridge was not Ivy League, but it was in the city, and it had one of the best quantitative finance programs in the state. When I told Mom, she didn't ask about the curriculum or the campus. She asked how much it would cost. When I told her I had secured a full tuition grant and would work to pay for my housing, she just shrugged and said, "Well, don't expect me to drive you up there. My car can't handle the tunnel traffic." I took the train. I carried 2 suitcases containing my entire life, and when I stepped onto the pavement in Manhattan, I didn't look back. College was not a time of self-discovery or parties for me. It was a tactical operation, while my roommates were rushing sororities or complaining about 8 o'clock classes. I was building my infrastructure. I chose a double major in finance and data analytics, not because I loved it, but because the placement rate was 98%. I needed a guarantee. My dorm room became my command center. I had a secondhand laptop that sounded like a jet engine when it ran too many programs. But it was enough. I quickly realized that the grant covered tuition, but living in New York required cash flow. I could have worked at the campus bookstore or swiped IDs at the dining hall, but that was linear income. I needed exponential growth. I went online. I found the underbelly of the gig economy where desperate small business owners needed technical fixes but couldn't afford agency rates. I taught myself SQL and Tableau on YouTube at double speed. I created a profile on a freelancing platform under the handle DataHawk. My first job was fixing a broken sales dashboard for a pool cleaning company in Florida. The owner sent me a mess of Excel sheets that looked like they had been organized by a drunk raccoon. I spent 6 hours cleaning the data, writing a script to automate the import, and building a clean visual interface. I charged him $150. When the money hit my PayPal account, it felt more real than any grade I had ever received. It was proof of concept. My brain could generate capital. I ramped up. I stopped sleeping more than 5 hours a night. I would go to lectures from 9 to 3, eat a protein bar for dinner, and then work on freelance gigs until 2 in the morning. I built inventory trackers for dropshippers. I debugged WordPress sites for mommy bloggers. I wrote Python scripts to scrape real estate data for investors. I was ghostwriting the digital infrastructure for people who had ideas, but no technical skills, and I was hoarding every penny. That was when I started investing. It wasn't gambling. I despised gambling. I had watched Logan scream at the TV too many times to ever mistake luck for strategy. I treated the stock market like a laboratory. I started with $500. I didn't buy the meme stocks or the trending companies that everyone on Reddit was shouting about. I bought boring, stable index funds. I bought fractional shares of blue-chip tech companies. I kept a physical notebook, a black moleskin that I carried everywhere. In it, I wrote down my thesis for every trade. Why am I buying this? What is the entry price? What is the exit price? What is the risk tolerance? If I couldn't write a paragraph justifying the purchase based on data, I didn't touch the button. I learned to love the red days as much as the green days. When the market dipped, I didn't panic. I saw a sale. I learned that emotion was the enemy of wealth. You had to be a machine. You had to be cold. Meanwhile, the phone calls from Ridgeport were a constant, draining frequency in the background of my life. Mom never called to ask about my exams. She never asked if I was making friends. The conversations always followed the same script. She would start with a litany of complaints about her health, her back, her knees, her migraines, before pivoting to the real reason for the call. "The water heater blew," she would say, or "they raised the insurance on the car again." Then came the silence, the pause where I was expected to fill the gap with my wallet. "I can send $200, Mom," I would say, staring at my textbooks, calculating how many freelance hours that represented. "Is that all?" she would sigh. "Well, I guess I will just not pick up my prescription this week. It is fine. I can handle the pain." It was a masterclass in manipulation, and for a long time, it worked. I sent the money. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself that I was successful, so I should share. But the dynamic shifted when Logan got his first credit card. I remember the call vividly. It was a Thursday night, and I was studying for a derivatives final. Mom was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "They are going to arrest him. Brianna, you have to do something." My stomach dropped. "Who? What happened?" "Logan," she sobbed. "He made a mistake. He didn't know the card had a limit. He thought it was like a debit card. Now the bank is calling, and they say he owes $5,000, and they are going to send it to collections and ruin his future." I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. Logan was 22 years old. He knew how a credit card worked. He had maxed it out on sports bets and electronics, assuming that the bill was a problem for future Logan, or rather, a problem for Brianna. "Mom, I don't have $5,000 lying around," I said. It was a lie. I had exactly $6,000 in my brokerage account. It was my entire net worth, my safety net, my seed corn. "But you are the smart one," she wailed. "You understand these things. You are at that fancy school. Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. Fix it. Brianna, please. He is your brother." "I can't just talk the debt away, Mom. That is not how banking works." "Then pay it," she snapped, the sorrow instantly replaced by anger. "You are working all those internet jobs. I know you have money. You are just being stingy while your brother is drowning." I sat in my dorm room, listening to the hum of the mini-fridge. I looked at the chart on my screen, a steady upward trend of compound interest that I had nurtured like a rare plant. If I paid this, I would be back to zero. I would be wiping out a year of sleepless nights. But the guilt was a physical weight. It was the programming she had installed in me since I was 10. "Fix it, Brianna." "I will pay it," I said, my voice hollow. "But this is the last time. He has to cut up the card." Of course, she promised. "I will take the scissors to it myself." I liquidated my positions. I paid the debt. And 2 weeks later, I saw a photo on Facebook of Logan holding a new gaming console. That was the moment the illusion shattered. I realized that my family did not view me as a person with goals and needs. They viewed me as a utility. I was like the electricity or the running water, something that was supposed to function silently in the background, existing solely to make their lives comfortable. They didn't want me to be rich because they loved me and wanted me to be secure. They wanted me to be rich so they could stop worrying about being poor. I changed my strategy. I didn't stop helping entirely, because the guilt was a habit I couldn't break overnight, but I started lying. I stopped telling them about my freelance rate increases. When I landed a major contract to build a data warehouse for a startup, earning $15,000 in a single month, I didn't say a word. When they asked how work was going, I slumped my shoulders and complained. "It is really hard," I would say. "The market is down, clients are not paying, I am barely scraping by." I sent them a fixed amount every month, $300, not a penny more. When they asked for extra, I told them I didn't have it. I invented stories about my own expenses. I told them my rent went up. I told them I had dental bills. I created a fictional version of Brianna who was struggling just as much as they were, because that was the only version of me they could tolerate without consuming. I learned that in my family. Honesty was a liability. If I told the truth about my success, it would be taxed at 100%. So I built my empire in the shadows. I graduated with a 4.0 GPA, debt-free, with a portfolio that had rebounded and grown to $50,000. I walked across the stage at graduation alone, because Mom said gas prices were too high to make the trip again. I didn't mind. I looked out at the crowd, and I didn't see empty seats anymore. I saw a future that belonged to me and me alone. I had learned the most important lesson of economics. Resources are scarce, and you cannot subsidize a failing entity forever without going bankrupt yourself. My family was a failing entity, and I was done being their bailout package. I moved into a small apartment in Jersey City, started my first real corporate job, and continued to live like a monk. I wore the same 3 suits to work. I packed my lunch, and every night I came home, opened my laptop, and watched my freedom grow, dollar by silent dollar. I thought I had successfully walled them off. I thought the monthly allowance was a small price to pay to keep the wolves at bay. But as I would find out at that Christmas dinner, you can never truly hide the scent of meat from a starving animal. Eventually, they catch the wind. Eventually, they come hunting. The glass walls of Harbor Light Finworks offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River, but my attention was rarely on the scenery. My world was a landscape of spreadsheets, risk assessment algorithms, and the frantic, high-octane energy of fintech valuation. I wasn't just an employee here, I was a surgeon of capital. My job was to dissect startups, separating the healthy tissue of genuine innovation from the cancerous growth of hype. In the conference room on the 42nd floor, I sat across from founders who wore hoodies worth more than my mother's car. I listened to pitches about blockchain logistics and AI-driven supply chains. I learned to speak a language that my family would find alien. Terms like burn rate, customer acquisition cost, liquidity preference, and anti-dilution provisions. Brianna, what's your read on the Series B for Nexus Pay? My boss, a razor-sharp woman named Elena, asked during a strategy meeting. Their user retention is artificially inflated by subsidies, I answered without looking at my notes. Once the venture capital tap turns off, their churn rate will triple. I wouldn't value them above $12 million pre-money. Elena nodded, scribbling on her pad. Agreed. Kill the deal. That was my reality. I had the power to kill deals worth millions with a sentence. I was respected. My opinion was currency. But then I would get in my car, drive an hour south to Ridgeport for Sunday dinner, and step into a different dimension. In my mother's house, I wasn't a senior analyst at a premier financial firm. I was Brianna, the girl who did internet stuff. So, are you still doing that laptop thing? Marla asked one Sunday, stirring a pot of instant mashed potatoes. Aunt Carol's son just got a job at the post office. Now that is a good job. Government benefits. You should look into that. Bree, stability. I was chopping carrots at the counter, wearing a blazer that cost $400, though I had told her I got it at a thrift store for $10. My job is stable, Mom. We just closed a quarter with 20% growth. Growth? She scoffed. It's all numbers in the air. One day the internet goes down. And where are you? Poof, gone. But people always need mail. I didn't argue. I had learned that explaining my career to Marla was like trying to explain quantum physics to a cat. She didn't want to understand. Understanding would require admitting that I had surpassed the low ceiling she had built for me. It was easier for her to categorize my work as a gig or a hobby, because that kept me small. It kept me as the daughter who still needed guidance, even if that guidance was terrible advice about applying to the post office. Despite the insults, I was trapped in a financial loop that I couldn't seem to sever. I had set up a recurring transfer of $800 a month to Marla's account. I told myself it was for groceries and utilities. I told myself it was rent for the childhood I had survived. But I knew the truth. I could see the transaction history. I would send the money on the first of the month. By the third, Marla would withdraw $500 in cash. By the fifth, Logan would be posting pictures on Instagram of new sneakers, or checking in at a sports bar with the boys. It was a laundering operation. I was the source, Marla was the funnel, and Logan was the drain. I confronted her about it once, gently. Mom, I noticed you took out a lot of cash this week. Is everything okay with the bills? Oh, she waved a hand, looking everywhere but at me. Things come up. The gutters needed cleaning, and I loaned a little to your brother. He's having a tough week. His car needed a part. Logan's car always needed a part. It was the most mechanically unsound vehicle in the history of the automotive industry, judging by how much money it consumed. But I knew the part was usually a parlay bet on the Giants game. I send that money for you. Mom, I said, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest. Not for Logan's gambling. It's not gambling, she snapped, turning the guilt dial up to 10. He is investing in sports. He knows what he is doing, and besides, it is my money once you give it to me. Don't be so controlling. Brianna, you help out, and that is good, but you don't get to dictate how I live. So I stopped asking. I let the $800 go every month as a tax on my peace of mind. It was the price of admission to the family. If I paid it, they left me alone enough to build my real life. And my real life was accelerating. While I was killing bad deals at Harbor Light, I was hunting for good ones for myself. I wasn't allowed to invest in the companies my firm targeted. That was insider trading. But the fintech world is a small, chatty village. I heard whispers. I met developers at hackathons who were building things in their basements that looked like magic. I started a separate brokerage account. I called it The Fortress. I didn't have millions then. I had savings from my salary, scraped together by living well below my means. I drove a 6-year-old Honda. I lived in a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a view of a brick wall. I ate meal-prepped chicken and rice. Every spare dollar went into The Fortress. My breakout moment didn't come from a stock tip. It came from a 22-year-old kid named Davey, who I met at a tech mixer in Brooklyn. He was wearing a stained t-shirt and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was pitching a back-end payment processing API that streamlined cross-border transactions for freelancers. Nobody was listening to him. The big investors were circling the guys with the flashy slide decks. But I sat down with Davey. I looked at his code. It was elegant, it was lean, it solved a boring, unsexy problem that cost companies billions a year. How much do you need? I asked him. 50,000, he said, his voice cracking. For server costs and to hire one more dev, I'll give you 10%. It was a massive risk. It was half of my liquid savings. If I told Marla, she would have laughed until she choked. You gave $50,000 to a boy in a dirty shirt? I wrote the check. 6 months later, a major credit card company acquired Davey's startup to integrate his tech into their legacy system. The acquisition price was in the 8 figures. My 10% stake didn't make me a billionaire, but when the wire transfer hit my account, I stared at the screen for an hour. $750,000. I had turned $50,000 into $750,000 in half a year. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Logan. Hey sis, Mom said you got a bonus at work? Need $200 for a lockpick. Guaranteed win this weekend. I'll pay you back double. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the $750,000 on my screen. The urge to share the news was visceral. I wanted to call my mom. I wanted to scream. I did it. I'm rich. We're safe. I wanted to drive to Ridgeport and slam a stack of cash on the table and say, "See, the laptop thing works." But then I imagined the scene. I imagined Marla's eyes widening, not with pride, but with calculation. $750,000? Oh, Brianna, we can fix the roof. We can pay off the house. Logan can finally start that business he talks about. I imagined Logan. He wouldn't see it as my success. He would see it as a lottery win that I had stumbled into. He would feel entitled to it. Come on, Bree, you don't need all that. Help a brother out. I realized with a sinking heart that money wouldn't fix my family. Money would only amplify their dysfunction. If I gave Logan $100,000, he wouldn't invest it. He would bet it, he would lose it, and then he would come back for more, angry that I had let him lose it, demanding a second chance. And Marla? She would never let me say no again. If she knew I had this kind of capital, Every no would be proof that I was cruel. How can you refuse to buy your mother a new car when you have that much sitting in the bank? Wealth, in the hands of my family, would be a weapon they would use to hold themselves hostage. Give us money, or we sink, and it's your fault because you could have saved us. So I made a choice, a hard, cold choice. I replied to Logan's text. Sorry, no bonus this time, just a regular paycheck. Can't help. Then I took the $750,000 and reinvested it. I diversified. I put it into real estate investment trusts, into emerging market funds, into more seed rounds for boring, unsexy startups. I built the silence around my finances like a wall. I became a master of camouflage. When I visited home, I complained about the cost of gas. I hunted for coupons with Marla, pretending to be thrilled when we saved 50 cents on detergent. I let them lecture me about financial responsibility. You need to be careful with your money, Brianna, Marla told me once, while I was driving her to the pharmacy in my old Honda. You spend too much on those coffees in the city. That adds up. You should make coffee at home like I do. You're right. Mom, I said, gripping the steering wheel. I need to be more disciplined. At that exact moment, my net worth had just crossed the $2 million mark. It was a strange, lonely power. I was walking around with a secret that could change their lives, but knowing that revealing it would destroy mine, I wasn't hiding the money because I was greedy. I was hiding it because I wanted to be loved for me, not for what I could provide. But as the years went on, and the 2 million became 5, and the 5 became 10, the lie became heavier. I wasn't just hiding a savings account anymore. I was hiding an entire identity. I was living as a double agent, in the city. I was M. Hayes, as I signed my emails, a respected angel investor and strategic consultant, in Ridgeport. I was Brianna, the struggling daughter who was one paycheck away from moving back home. I thought I could keep the two worlds separate forever. I thought I was smart enough to keep the blast doors closed. But arrogance is a dangerous blinder. I got sloppy. I got comfortable. And on that Christmas day, with the $14 million valuation glowing on the screen, I realized that I had underestimated the one variable I couldn't control, the sheer, blinding entitlement of a family that believes they own you. I looked at them now, in the living room. The shock of the reveal had worn off, replaced by the grim determination of a negotiation. So, Marla said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if we were plotting a crime together. How do we get it out? Can we go to the bank tomorrow? We? I asked, feeling the bitter taste of bile in my throat. Don't be like that, she chided. We need to make a plan. Logan has debts, real debts. Brianna, scary debts. This is a sign. God sent this money to save us. God hadn't sent it. I had earned it. I had bled for it in boardrooms and sleepless nights. But looking at their faces, I knew that distinction didn't matter. To them, I wasn't the creator of the wealth. I was just the vessel, and they were ready to break the vessel to get at the gold inside. The turning point. The moment I decided to stop building someone else's castle and start laying the foundation for my own fortress, happened on a Tuesday in November. I was still at Harbor Light Finworks. We had just closed the acquisition of a payment processing startup called Swift Ledger. I had spent 4 months living inside their data room. I had modeled their growth projections, stress-tested their code against cyber threats, and practically wrote the investment thesis that convinced our partners to sign the check. The deal was worth $200 million. My boss, Elena, walked into my office with a bottle of champagne and a bonus check. I opened the envelope. It was for $12,000. Great work, Brianna, she said, clinking her glass against a coffee mug I was holding. You really nailed the due diligence. The partners are thrilled. $12,000. It was a lot of money to most people. It was a fortune to my mother. But compared to $200 million, it was a rounding error. It was the crumbs swept off the table. I realized then that I was the engine, but they were the drivers. I was selling my intellect, my anxiety, and my time for a flat fee, while they were reaping the exponential rewards of ownership. I did not quit that day. That would have been emotional. And emotion is bad for business. Instead, I began a 6-month exit strategy. I stopped going out to lunch. I canceled my streaming subscriptions. I moved my small savings into a high-yield liquidity account. I met with a corporate lawyer named Samuel in a dingy diner 3 towns over, so nobody from my firm would see us. We drafted the articles of incorporation for Northridge Venture Studio. I learned about tax structures, liability protection, and how to structure a cap table so that I retained absolute control. When I finally resigned from Harbor Light, I told my mother I was transitioning to freelance consulting. Freelance? She asked, her voice tight with panic. Does that mean you lose your health insurance? What about the monthly help you send us? Is that going to stop? The money will stay the same, Mom, I assured her. I just need a change of pace. She relaxed immediately. Oh, good. As long as you are okay. You know, Logan was looking at those new gaming monitors. He says it helps with his hand-eye coordination for his potential career. I am fine, Mom, I said, cutting the call before I could scream. The reality of that first year at Northridge was not the glamorous entrepreneur life you see on Instagram. It was a bloodbath. I was alone. I was working out of my apartment, using a folding table as a desk. I had poured my savings into 2 early-stage fintech companies. One of them, a peer-to-peer lending platform, imploded 3 months in. The founder took the seed money, had a mental breakdown, and moved to Bali to become a yoga instructor. My $50,000 investment evaporated overnight. I remember lying on the floor of my apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, unable to breathe. I had no salary. I had no safety net. If this failed, I wouldn't just be broke. I would have to go back to Marla and admit she was right. I would have to hear her say, I told you that internet stuff was risky. To keep the company alive, I paid myself a salary that was below the poverty line. I ate ramen noodles. I walked everywhere to save subway fare. I wore the same clothes until they frayed. This extreme frugality had an unintended benefit. It made my cover story perfect. When I visited Ridgeport, I looked tired. I looked worn out. I drove my rattling Honda into the driveway, and my family looked at me with a mix of pity and relief. Pity because I looked like a failure, and relief because a failure, Brianna was a safe Brianna. A struggling Brianna was someone they could understand. You look thin, Marla said one afternoon, pinching my arm. Are you eating? Maybe you should come home. You can sleep in your old room. Logan won't mind sharing the bathroom again. I am managing, Mom, I said. Work is just unpredictable. I told you, she sighed, pouring herself a glass of wine at 2 p.m. You should have applied at the post office, but you never listen. You always have to do things the hard way. Then, she cleared her throat. The pivot was coming. Speaking of hard times, the property tax went up, and Logan, well, he needs a suit. He has an interview. An interview? I asked, surprised. Where? It is not a job interview. Exactly, Logan chimed in. Walking into the kitchen, he was wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt, scratching his stomach. It is a meeting with some investors. I have a system, Bree, a betting system. It is algorithmic, like what you do, but for sports. I stared at him. Logan, betting on spreads is not an algorithm. It is gambling. You don't get it, he said, shaking his head with the condescension of the truly ignorant. I have been tracking the stats. I have a 90% win rate on paper. I just need capital. I need a bankroll to prove the concept. If I had $5,000, I could turn it into 50 in a month, guaranteed. If it is guaranteed, why don't you get a loan? I asked. Because the banks are rigged, Logan shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. They don't understand visionaries. But you are supposed to be family. Mom said you are freelancing now. That means you set your own rates, right? Can't you just charge a client an extra $5,000 and float me the cash? He was asking me to commit fraud. He was asking me to embezzle from my hypothetical clients to fund a gambling addiction that he was rebranding as a hedge fund. I cannot do that, Logan, I said, and I don't have $5,000 to give you. But you send Mom $800 every month, he countered. So you have money. You are just holding out on me. That money is for bills, I said, my voice rising. It is to keep the lights on. I am a bill, Logan yelled. I am a liability. If I don't pay this, look, I owe some guys, okay? It is not just about the system. I need to clear the slate. This was the cycle, the dream of the big win, followed immediately by the reality of the desperate debt. I took a deep breath. I decided to try, one last time, to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. I will not give you cash, I said firmly, but I will pay for a credit counselor, and I will pay for a therapist who specializes in gambling addiction. I will send the checks directly to them. No cash touches your hands. The room went silent. Marla looked at me as if I had slapped her. Logan looked at me with pure disgust. Therapy? Logan spat the word out like a curse. I don't need a shrink. Brianna, I am not crazy. I am broke. There is a difference. You think you are so superior, sitting there with your little offer to fix me? I don't need fixing. I need funding. She is trying to help. Logan, Marla said, but her tone was weak. Then she turned to me, her eyes hardening. But Brianna, really? Therapy? That is for rich people with made-up problems. Your brother has real problems. Why do you have to make everything so complicated? If you have the money for a doctor, just give it to him. Let him handle his own business. Giving him money is not helping him. Mom, it is feeding the problem. You have changed, Marla said, shaking her head. It was a phrase she used whenever I set a boundary. Ever since you went to the city, you have become so cold, so calculating. You treat your family like a transaction. We are flesh and blood, not a spreadsheet. I am trying to save him, I argued, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. If he keeps doing this, he is going to end up in jail or worse. Don't you dare speak that over him, Marla shrieked. You take that back. My son is a good boy. He is just unlucky. And you are lucky. That is the only difference. You got lucky with your grades, lucky with your job, and now you hoard it. I looked at them. I saw the delusion that was cemented in their minds. To them, my 12-hour workdays, my panic attacks, my years of eating rice and beans, that was all luck. And Logan's laziness, his refusal to work, his addiction, that was just bad luck. I realized then that they did not want me to succeed. They wanted me to suffer with them. If I was struggling, I was part of the tribe. If I was solving problems, I was an outsider. I am not giving him the money, I repeated. That is final. Logan stormed out of the room, kicking a chair as he went. Useless, he screamed. You are useless. Marla looked at me with disappointment radiating from her like heat. I hope you are happy, Brianna. You upset him. Now he is going to go out and do something stupid, and it will be on your conscience. I drove back to the city that night in silence. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I went back to my empty apartment, opened my laptop, and saw that the second company I had invested in, a small data encryption startup, had just signed a pilot contract with a regional bank. It was a small win. It meant Northridge would survive another month. I sat there in the dark, the screen illuminating my face, and I felt a strange, hollow victory. I was building a future. I was creating value. I was climbing out of the pit. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could never throw a rope down to them. They wouldn't use it to climb up. They would just use it to pull me back down into the mud. I decided then to double down on the secrecy. If they thought I was cold when I was struggling, I could not imagine the monster they would paint me as if they knew I was on the verge of becoming a millionaire. I would play the role of the poor, struggling freelancer until the day I died, if that was what it took to keep my fortress safe. But secrets, like rot, have a way of spreading, and as my accounts grew, so did the pressure. I didn't know it then, but Logan wasn't just gambling with money anymore. He was gambling with resentment, and he was watching me much closer than I thought. The lead-up to the execution began. As most family disasters do, with a phone call about the price of poultry. 3 days before Christmas, Marla called me while I was in the middle of a due diligence meeting with a team from Singapore. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, and again, the third time. The emergency protocol kicked in, the conditioning that had been installed in me since I was 10 years old, and I stepped out of the conference room, my heart hammering, expecting to hear that the house had burned down or Logan was in the hospital. "Do you know how much a turkey costs this year?" Marla asked the moment I picked up. No hello, no apology for the interruption, just the sheer, unadulterated panic of inflation. I was at the market, Brianna, $40, for a bird. It is robbery. I stood there in the aisle and I just wanted to cry. How are regular people supposed to live? I leaned against the cool glass wall of the corridor, closing my eyes. "Mom, I am in a meeting. Is everyone okay?" "We are not okay," she snapped. "We are broke. Your brother needs tires. His car is sliding all over the road. It is a death trap. And now I can't even afford a decent Christmas dinner without taking out a loan. It is humiliating." Then came the pivot. It was a move so practiced it deserved its own slide deck. "You know?" She softened her voice, dropping into that conspiratorial register she used when she wanted to recruit me into her delusions. "Logan saw a used sedan at the dealership, $4,000. It is a steal. If he had a reliable car, he could drive for those delivery apps. It would be a fresh start, a real opportunity. Maybe, since it is Christmas." I knew what fresh start meant. It meant Logan would drive the car for 2 weeks, get bored, and then sell it for cash to place a bet on the Super Bowl. "I am not buying Logan a car." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice flat. "It is not buying a car," she corrected instantly. "It is investing in his future. But fine, be like that. Let your brother drive on bald tires in the snow. I guess I will just boil some pasta for Christmas dinner. We won't invite Aunt Carol. I can't let her see us like this." This was the trap. She knew I could withstand the guilt about Logan, but she knew I could not withstand the public shame of the family looking destitute. I had built my entire life around escaping the stigma of poverty. She was threatening to drag me back into it, publicly. "I will handle dinner," I said, looking at my watch. The Singapore team was waiting. "I will order everything: food, wine, dessert. You don't have to buy a single thing. Invite Aunt Carol. Invite the neighbors if you want. I will cover it." "Everything?" she asked, the grief evaporating instantly. "Even the shrimp cocktail? You know Carol loves the jumbo ones." "Yes, Mom, even the jumbo shrimp. I have to go." I hung up and walked back into the meeting, where I proceeded to negotiate a 3.5% equity stake in a blockchain logistics firm. The contrast would have been funny if it wasn't so exhausting. I could move millions with a signature, but I couldn't get my mother to buy a turkey without a hostage negotiation. I did not cook for Christmas. I project managed it. I treated the dinner like a supply chain operation. I hired a high-end catering company from the next county, one that specialized in corporate events. I ordered a menu that was calibrated to impress but not intimidate: prime rib, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, and yes, the jumbo shrimp cocktail. I arranged for a florist to deliver a centerpiece of white roses and pine, costing $250, because I knew Marla would judge the table setting. I spent nearly $2,000 in total. To my bank account, it was invisible. To my family, it should have been a grand gesture. But when I arrived at the house on Christmas Day, 2 hours early to coordinate the delivery, I realized I had made a tactical error. I had paid for the stage, but Marla was the one directing the play. "Oh, look at this," Marla cooed, as the delivery drivers brought in the silver trays. She was wearing a red velvet dress I had bought her 3 years ago. I told my friend at the bistro, "You know, the owner owes me a favor from way back." I told him, "I need the best for my family." And look what he sent. He really came through for me. I stood in the corner, unboxing the wine I had selected, a Cabernet Sauvignon that retailed for $80 a bottle. "Mom, this is the catering company I hired. You don't know the owner." She waved a hand at me. dismissing reality. It is all about connections. Brianna, you have to know how to talk to people. If you just ordered this online, they would have sent the dry meat. But because I called and made a fuss, they sent the prime cuts. It is a mother's touch. I watched her explain this to Aunt Carol 10 minutes later. Marla, this spread is incredible, Carol exclaimed, eyeing the shrimp. You must have been saving up for months. Well, Marla sighed, looking visibly martyred. It has been a hard year, but I said to myself, Marla, family comes first. I scraped together what I could. I called in some favors. I just wanted everyone to have a nice day. She didn't mention my name once, not once, in her narrative. The food had materialized through the sheer force of her love and sacrifice. I was just the delivery girl who happened to be standing there holding the corkscrew. I poured the wine. I didn't correct her. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for credit. I was doing it to keep the peace. I was paying a ransom to keep the poor relative narrative at bay for one more year. Then Logan arrived. He was 45 minutes late. He walked in the front door without knocking, bringing a gust of freezing air with him. He didn't have gifts. He didn't have a bottle of wine. He was wearing a jersey and expensive sneakers that looked brand new, likely purchased with the money Marla had borrowed for his tires. Yo, he said, acknowledging the room with a nod. He walked straight to the shrimp platter, picked up a tail, and ate it in one bite. Traffic was brutal. Is the game on? Logan, say hello to your aunt, Marla said, but her voice was soft, affectionate. She didn't scold him for being late. She didn't ask why he hadn't helped set up. She looked at him like he was a returning war hero. Hey, Aunt Carol, Logan said, pulling his phone out of his pocket. Hey, Bree, nice spread. Did you use a coupon? Hello, Logan, I said, feeling the familiar tightening in my jaw. And no coupons. Cool, he muttered, already scrolling. Hey, did you see the spread on the Cowboys game? It shifted 2 points. Someone knows something. He sat down at the head of the table. Dad's old seat. He didn't ask if he could sit there. He just took it. He propped his phone up against the flower centerpiece I had paid for, turning the holiday dinner into a sports bar viewing party. Marla rushed over to fill his glass. Are you hungry? Honey, let me get you a plate before the others start picking at it. You look tired. Have you been working hard? Grinding, Ma, grinding, Logan said, not looking up from his screen. I stood by the kitchen door, holding a stack of napkins. I looked at my brother, the VIP guest who had contributed $0 and zero effort, being served by my mother. Then I looked at myself, the financier of this entire operation, standing like a waiter. It was in that moment of irritation that I made the mistake. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a price alert. The merger deal, the one involving the Japanese bank and the startup in my portfolio, I had set a specific trigger. If the regulatory approval news hit the wire services, the stock would unhalt, and the valuation would update. I checked the notification. Market alert. Regulatory approval granted. Trading resumed. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The valuation of Northridge was about to adjust to reflect the new asset prices. I needed to see the number. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a fiduciary duty. I needed to know if I had triggered a liquidity event that required tax planning before the year ended in 6 days. I will be right back, I murmured. Nobody heard me. Marla was busy cutting Logan's meat for him. I slipped into the living room. I sat on the sofa, the same spot where I had done my homework as a child. I pulled my laptop from my bag. I opened the lid. I logged in. The dashboard loaded. I watched the graph spike. It was beautiful. A vertical green line that represented validation. It represented freedom. I saw the total equity figure tick up, calculating the new share price. 14 million. I took a deep breath, letting the numbers settle in my mind. It was done. I was safe. I could buy this house 100 times over. I could buy Logan's dream car and drive it off a cliff just for fun. Brianna! Marla's voice shrieked from the dining room. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Brianna, The gravy boat is empty and Uncle Jerry spilled his wine. Get in here. It was a reflex, a Pavlovian response to the tone of her voice. For 20 years, that tone meant jump. It meant fix it. It meant Brianna. You are the only adult here, so do the work. I didn't assess the risk. I just reacted to the training. I stood up. I went to close the laptop. Now, Brianna, it is soaking into the rug. I shoved the laptop lid down. I felt it close. I turned and ran toward the dining room, my mind already switching from CEO to janitor. But I hadn't checked. I hadn't heard the click of the latch. I hadn't waited for the screen to go black. I rushed into the dining room, grabbing a roll of paper towels. I blotted the red wine stain on the carpet while Uncle Jerry apologized drunkenly. I ran to the kitchen to refill the gravy boat. I topped off everyone's water glasses. I played the role of the good daughter, the helpful sister, the servant. I spent 10 minutes in that dining room, catering to their needs, fixing their small, messy problems. And all the while, in the silent living room just 10 feet away, the hinge of my laptop had caught on the thick fabric of a throw pillow. The lid had bounced back open just an inch. The screen did not sleep. The dashboard did not time out. The green numbers continued to glow in the dim light, pulsing like a beacon, waiting for the one person in the house who was greedy enough to come looking for them. I was wiping a spot of gravy off the tablecloth when I heard Logan's chair scrape back. "I gotta check the score on the big TV," he announced, standing up. "My phone signal sucks in here." "Go ahead, honey," Marla said, smiling at him. "Relax. Brianna has everything under control." I watched him walk toward the archway. I felt a sudden, cold prickle on the back of my neck. I looked at my hands, holding a dirty napkin. I looked at the empty seat where I should have been. And then I remembered the pillow. I dropped the napkin. "Logan, wait," I said. But it was too late. He was already through the archway. He was already in the room. And I heard the silence that followed, a silence so sudden and absolute that it felt like the air had been sucked out of the house. The silence in the living room was not empty. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I stood in the archway, my hands still damp from the gravy boat, looking at the tableau that had destroyed my life in a single second. Logan was frozen on the sofa, the laptop resting on his knees like a holy tablet. Marla was standing over his shoulder, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide and unblinking as she stared at the green digits. The secret was dead. The corpse was right there on the screen. 14 million, Marla whispered. The number left her lips not as a prayer, but as an indictment. She turned to me slowly, and the look on her face was not joy. It was a terrifying, twisted mix of fury and victimization. "You have $14 million?" "It is a valuation," I said, my voice sounding mechanical. "It is equity. It is not cash in a shoebox." "Don't give me that technical garbage," Marla screamed, her voice cracking the silence so violently that Aunt Carol jumped. "It is money. It is right there. Total equity. I know what equity means. Brianna, it means you are rich. It means you have been sitting here, watching me clip coupons, watching your brother drive a death trap, while you are sitting on an empire." "Mom, please lowers your voice," I said, stepping into the room. "I can explain." "Explain?" Marla laughed, a high hysterical sound. "What is there to explain? You lied. For years. You sat at my table, ate my food, let me worry about the electric bill, and you were laughing at us the whole time." "I was not laughing," I said, my defenses rising. "I was protecting myself, and I was protecting you." "Protecting us?" Logan finally spoke. He didn't look up from the screen. He was scrolling through the dashboard now, clicking tabs with a trembling finger. "You call this protection? I have been drowning. Bree, drowning. And you have been sitting on a lifeboat the size of a yacht." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were wet with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustrated entitlement. "I am your brother. We shared a bunk bed. How could you do this to me?" "I have helped you, Logan, I said. I have sent money every month. I paid off your credit card. I bought the groceries for this party. Groceries! Logan spat the word out. You bought shrimp while you have $14 million. Do you know how insulting that is? It is like throwing pennies at a beggar. It is not your money, Logan, I said, my voice hardening. I earned it. I built it. From nothing. While you were watching football, I was working. We are family, Marla shouted, slamming her hand down on the coffee table. The vase of flowers shook. Blood is thicker than water, Brianna. Or did you forget that in your fancy city office, when you have this much, it belongs to the house. That is the rule. We survive together. We rise together. I looked around the room. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jerry were staring at me with a mixture of awe and judgment. Brianna, honey, Aunt Carol said softly, 14 million is a lot. Maybe you could just help him a little, just to get him on his feet? I mean, you wouldn't even miss 100,000, would you? That was the knife in the gut, the bystander effect. To them, the math was simple. I had a surplus. Logan had a deficit. So I was the villain for not balancing the equation. They didn't see the years of discipline. They only saw the disparity. It is not about the amount, I said, trying to keep my hands from shaking. It is about where it goes. I have sent Mom $800 a month for 5 years. That is nearly $50,000. Where is it? Where is that money? I turned to Marla. Tell them, Mom. Tell them where the grocery money went. Marla flushed red. I used it for bills. No, I said, stepping closer. I saw the withdrawal slips you left on the counter last Thanksgiving. You pull cash out 2 days after I send it, and Logan comes over an hour later. You have been funneling my salary into his gambling for years. It is not gambling, Logan roared. Standing up, he held the laptop in one hand like a weapon. It is trading. I am a trader, just like you. I just had a bad run. The refs were paid off. The system is rigged. But if I had capital, real capital, I could win it all back. I could double your money. Bree, I swear to God. I don't want you to double my money, I said. I want you to get a job. I have a job, Logan yelled. This is my job. You don't respect it because you are an elitist snob. You think you are better than me? I think I don't owe bookies money, I shot back. The room went dead silent. Logan's face drained of color. He took a step back, clutching the laptop to his chest. I don't owe bookies, he muttered. It is just market losses. Who are they? Logan? I asked. My analyst brain kicked in. I saw the signs, the desperate need for tires that weren't tires, the panic in his eyes when he asked for $5,000 last month. You said earlier you had people looking for you. You said it wasn't a bank. Banks don't send people looking for you. They send letters. Who is looking for you? Logan looked at Mom. Mom looked at the floor. It is a misunderstanding, Marla said quickly, her voice trembling. He just borrowed from a private lender to cover a margin call. A private lender, I repeated. You mean a loan shark. How much? Logan? He didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, at the $14 million that looked like his salvation. How much? I demanded. 80, he whispered. $80? Aunt Carol asked hopefully. 80,000, Logan said. His voice broke. And the interest is, it is compounding weekly. They said if I don't have 20 by Tuesday, they are going to take the car, and then they are going to come to the house. Marla began to sob. He is just a boy. Brianna, he made a mistake. They are scary people. You have to help him. You have 14 million. 80,000 is nothing to you. You can write a check right now and save his life. I felt cold. Ice cold. This wasn't just about greed anymore. This was dangerous. If I paid this debt, I wasn't just losing money. I was marking myself. I would become the whale. The moment those private lenders knew Logan had a sister with $14 million who paid on demand, they would never let him go. They would bleed him, and me, until we were dry. And Logan? If I bailed him out, he would learn nothing. He would learn that his sister was a bottomless ATM. He would bet again next week. I cannot pay it, I said. Cannot? Marla screamed. Or will not? Will not, I said. Because if I pay them, they will come back, and you will never stop gambling. I will stop, Logan pleaded. I swear on Dad's grave. Just this once. Clear the slate. Bree, please. No, I said. I am drawing a line, right now. I took a deep breath. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Here is what is going to happen, I said, my voice projecting across the room. I will not give you a single cent of cash, not for the debt, not for the investment, not for groceries. I am cutting off the monthly transfer effective today. Marla gasped. You can't. How will we live? You will live by working, I said, but I will do this. I will pay for a forensic accountant to audit the debt and negotiate a settlement with these people, directly. I will pay for an inpatient rehab program for gambling addiction for Logan, and I will pay for a financial planner to help Mom budget her pension. I looked at Logan. But no cash goes to you, ever again. You go to rehab, or you figure this out yourself. Logan looked at me with pure hatred. The mask of the desperate brother fell away, revealing the addict beneath. I am not going to rehab, he hissed. I need the money now. Tuesday. Brianna, do you hear me? Tuesday. Then you better start selling things, I said. Give me my laptop. No, Logan said. He backed away. You are going to do the transfer. Right now. Open the app. Transfer the money to Mom's account. She can give it to me. I am not doing that. You are going to do it, Marla shrieked. She stepped between me and the door. Her face was twisted into something I didn't recognize. You selfish, ungrateful little brat. After everything I sacrificed, you are going to let your brother get hurt? You are going to let thugs come to my house? You let them into your life. Mom, I said. I am trying to get them out. If you walk out that door without paying, Marla said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, I will destroy you. I will tell everyone. I will call Aunt Carol's church group. I will post on Facebook. I will tell everyone that my millionaire daughter left her family to rot. I will tell them you are a thief. I will tell them you stole that money from us. That is blackmail, I said. It is justice, Marla yelled. You owe us. You are nothing without this family. Logan slammed the laptop onto the dining table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. He leaned over it, his face inches from the screen. Open it, he commanded. He wasn't asking anymore. He was physically looming over me, his fists clenched. Log in. Send the money. Or I swear to God, Brianna, I will break this thing in half. If you break it, I said, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The security protocols lock the account. You get nothing. Don't test me, Logan screamed, spitting as he yelled. You think you are so smart? You think you are better than us? Log in, now. I looked at my mother. She wasn't stopping him. She was watching, waiting for me to break. She was willing to let her son physically threaten me if it meant she got the payout. The courtroom was in session, and the verdict had been delivered. I was guilty of having resources, and the sentence was indefinite servitude. But they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't the scared little girl who forged permission slips anymore. I was a risk analyst, and I had just assessed that this asset, this family, was a total loss. Okay, I said softly. Okay, move aside. I will log in. Logan stepped back, a triumphant smirk twisting his face. See, he said to Marla. I told you. She just needed a little push. I walked to the table. I placed my hands on the keyboard. I felt the cold metal under my fingertips. I looked at the $14 million one last time. Then I looked at the sign out button, and I looked at the remote wipe protocol I had installed for emergencies, a sequence of keys that would brick the machine and require a biometric key at the bank vault to restore access. Make sure you add a 0, Logan sneered. I took a breath, and I made my move. I drove away from the house on tires that felt like they were skimming over black ice. though the roads were dry. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my fingers had turned into claws. On the passenger seat, my phone was vibrating against the leather. It wasn't a ring. It was a continuous, angry buzz, like a swarm of hornets trapped in a jar. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. The Hayes Family Connect group chat, a digital hellscape I had muted years ago but never left, was detonating. When I finally reached the sanctuary of my apartment in the city, the silence of the hallway felt heavy. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, then I engaged the security system. Only then did I sit down on my floor, leaning my back against the door, and pick up the phone. 73 missed calls, 114 messages. The text messages were a scrolling waterfall of guilt and rage. Mom, you are dead to me. Do not come back until you have the check. Mom, I am calling the police. You stole our future. Logan, you think you're safe? Watch your back. Aunt Carol, Brianna, honey, please just answer. Your mother is hyperventilating. Just send them something small. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. The time for crying had ended when Logan threatened to break my laptop. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, poured myself a glass of water, and went to sleep. It was a cold, dreamless sleep. The kind soldiers get in a trench because they know the shelling will start again at dawn. The shelling resumed at 7 in the morning. I woke up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. The machine that contained the $14 million in the digital soul of my company. I logged into my social media accounts, not to browse, but to patrol the perimeter. It didn't take long to find the breach. Marla had been busy. At 6:30 in the morning, she had posted a manifesto on Facebook. It was long, rambling, and weaponized to trigger maximum sympathy from her 300 friends, most of whom were neighbors, church members, and extended family. I have never been one to air dirty laundry, it began, a lie so bold I almost laughed. But a mother's heart can only break so many times. Last night, my daughter Brianna came to our home for Christmas. We welcomed her with open arms, despite her being distant for years, but instead of love, she brought cruelty. We found out she has become incredibly wealthy, millions, earned in secret, while watching her own brother face a life-or-death crisis and her mother struggle to buy food. When we asked for help, not a handout, just a loan to save family, she laughed in our faces and left us to rot. I don't know who she is anymore. Money changes people, and the devil has taken my little girl. The comments were already pouring in. OMG Marla, I am so sorry. Ungrateful brat, after all you did for her. Money is the root of all evil. Stay strong, Mama. But then I saw Logan's comment. It was buried under a sympathy gift from a neighbor. Logan Hayes wrote, "It's not just that she's cheap. Ma, you have to wonder where that money came from so fast. People don't make $14 million in a few years doing data entry unless they are cooking the books or washing cash. Just saying, maybe the authorities should look into Northridge Ventures Studio." My blood ran cold. He had named the company. He hadn't just called me a bad sister. He was publicly casting doubt on the legitimacy of my fund. In the world of finance, reputation is not just vanity, it is collateral. If a rumor starts that a fund is washing cash, banks freeze accounts, partners pull out, audits begin. Logan wasn't just venting. He was trying to burn my house down to force me out. I didn't type a furious reply. I didn't comment, "You are a liar." I didn't report the post to Facebook, because that would make it disappear, and I needed it to exist. I opened a new folder on my desktop named Evidence. I took screenshots of the post. I took screenshots of the timestamp. I expanded Logan's comment and captured it, ensuring his name and the time were visible. I went to his profile and screenshotted his bio. Then I picked up my phone and called a number I had saved for a worst-case scenario. "Lawson and Associates," a receptionist answered. "This is Brianna Hayes. I need to speak to David. It is an emergency regarding defamation and tortious interference with business relations." David Lawson was a shark in a $3,000 suit who specialized in reputation management for high net worth individuals. I had met him at a charity gala 2 years ago. Brianna. David's voice came on the line a minute later, smooth and professional. Merry Christmas. I assume this isn't a social call. My mother and brother are defaming me online, I said, cutting to the chase. They are accusing me of financial crimes and fraud on a public forum. They have named my company. I need a cease and desist sent immediately, and I need a draft for a libel suit ready to file if they don't comply within 12 hours. Send me the screenshots, David said. We will have the courier at their door by noon. Do you want to seek damages? I don't want their money. David, they don't have any. I want a gag order. I want them to be so terrified of the legal system that they never say my name again. Understood. I'll get the team on it. I hung up. I felt a grim sense of control returning. This was a problem. I solved problems. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. Around 10 o'clock, while I was drafting an email to my investors to preemptively explain the personal matter, my inbox pinged. It was an email from the founder of a cybersecurity startup I was advising. His name was Marcus. Subject: Weird email. Body: Hey Bree, hope you had a good holiday. I got this weird email this morning from an anonymous Proton Mail account. It's probably spam, but since it mentioned you by name, I thought I should forward it. See below. I scrolled down to the forwarded message. From Truth Teller. Proton Mail. Com. Subject: Warning, Northridge Ventures. Marcus's email. You should check your cap table. Brianna Hayes is under investigation for embezzling funds from her previous employer. Her capital is stolen. Get out before the feds shut her down. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a Facebook comment. This was a targeted strike. This email had been sent directly to a founder in my network. I quickly checked my server logs. I searched for the sender address. It didn't appear in my direct inbox. But when I ran a search across my contacts, I found 3 more founders who had received the same email. Someone was actively trying to destroy my career. My first thought was a competitor. In fintech, corporate sabotage wasn't unheard of. But the phrasing, stolen from her previous employer, felt personal. It felt petty. It sounded like the kind of lie someone would tell if they didn't understand how venture capital actually worked. I needed to know who was behind Truth Teller 8892. Proton Mail is encrypted. It is designed to be untraceable, but amateurs make mistakes. They get lazy. I copied the email header and ran a basic analysis. The sender had used a VPN, routing the traffic through Switzerland. Dead end. But then I looked at the language again. Get out before the feds shut her down. I remembered something. A year ago. Logan had tried to sell me on his system. He had sent me a link to a website where he bought his guaranteed tips. I went into my archived chats with Logan. I found the link, elitesportspics.com. I went to the site. I clicked on the testimonials page. There, near the bottom, was a review from a user named TruthTeller8892. Best service ever. Made $5,000 in a week. TruthTeller8892. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the same handle. He was so arrogant, so stupid, that he used his gambling handle to send anonymous blackmail emails. I needed more proof. I needed to link that handle to Logan definitively. I went to a site called What's My Name, an OSINT, open source intelligence tool that scans usernames across the web. I typed in TruthTeller8892. It popped up on a forum for fantasy football. It popped up on a Reddit thread about dodging loan sharks. And crucially, it popped up on an old Venmo account that had been inactive for 2 years. I clicked the Venmo link. The profile picture was a blurry photo of a dog. I recognized the dog. It was Buster, our childhood golden retriever, and the username displayed was L. Hayes. I sat back in my chair, the realization washing over me like ice water. This wasn't just a tantrum because I refused to pay his debt. This was premeditated. The email to Marcus had been sent at 2 a.m. That meant immediately after I left the house, while I was driving home. Logan had sat down, probably with my mother egging him on, and decided that if I wouldn't give him the money, he would destroy the source of the money. He was trying to make me toxic. He figured if he terrified my investors and partners, I would panic. I would be desperate to make it stop. I would pay him the $80,000 just to silence him. It was extortion. It was a felony. I looked at the screen. I looked at the picture of Buster the dog. I remembered how Logan used to cry when Buster got sick. I remembered the little boy I used to make grilled cheese sandwiches for. That boy was dead. In his place was a man who was willing to incinerate my entire life's work because he bet on the wrong team. I picked up the phone and called David back. "Don't send the cease and desist yet," I said. "Why?" David asked. "Did they take the post down?" "No," I said. "I have new evidence. This isn't just defamation anymore. It is criminal extortion and cyber harassment. I have proof that Logan is emailing my business partners under an alias, trying to sabotage my contracts." "That changes things," David said, his tone shifting from advisor to prosecutor. "That is federal. Brianna, tortious interference. If we can prove damages, we can bury him. But listen to me. If you go this route, you are putting your brother in handcuffs. Are you ready for that?" I looked out the window at the skyline of Manhattan. I thought about the $14 million. I thought about the cold nights in my dorm room. I thought about the way Marla looked at me when she said, "I will destroy you." They had declared war. They just didn't realize that they were fighting a war with sticks and stones, while I was sitting in the command center of a drone strike. "I don't want him in handcuffs yet," I said, a plan forming in my mind, a plan that was colder and more effective than jail. "I want leverage, absolute, unbreakable leverage." "What do you have in mind?" "I am going to let them think they are winning," I said. "I am going to let them think I am scared. I am going to invite them to a meeting to settle this, and when they walk into that room, I am going to close the trap so tight they will never be able to breathe without my permission again." "Brianna," David warned, "this is risky." "No, David," I said, "betting $80,000 you don't have is risky. This is just risk management." I hung up. I opened my email client and drafted a message to my mother. My fingers flew across the keys. "Mom, I saw your post. I saw the emails. You win. I can't lose my company. The investors are asking questions. If I give you the money, will you stop? I can't do a transfer because my accounts are flagged now thanks to Logan. We need to meet in person to sign a settlement agreement so I can release the funds legally. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. Bring Logan. Please, just make it stop." I hit send. I knew exactly what they would do when they read it. They would high-five. They would think I had cracked. They would think they had bullied the weak sister into submission. They had no idea that I wasn't inviting them to a surrender. I was inviting them to their own trial, and this time, I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The conference room at Northridge Venture Studio was designed to intimidate. It was a glass box suspended 40 floors above Manhattan, with a table made of a single slab of polished concrete that looked cold enough to freeze blood. I sat at the head of the table, not as a daughter, but as the chairman of the board. On my right sat David, my attorney, whose suit cost more than Logan's car. On my left sat Mr. Sterling, a forensic accountant who had spent 20 years tracking money laundering for the State Department. Opposite us sat the Hayes delegation. Marla had brought reinforcements, just as I expected. Aunt Carol was there, looking nervous and clutching her purse. Uncle Jerry was there, wearing a tie that was too short, looking around the office with wide, greedy eyes, and in the center sat Logan and Marla. They looked like they had already won. They thought this was a settlement meeting. They thought they had bullied me into submission with a Facebook post and a few nasty emails. "Well," Marla said, smoothing her skirt. She didn't look at the view. She looked at the blank checkbook sitting in front of me. "I am glad you finally came to your senses. Brianna, it is a shame we had to drag the family into this, but sometimes tough love is necessary." Logan leaned back, putting his feet on the base of the table. "Yeah, let's just get this over with. I need the transfer to clear by noon. $80,000 for the debt, and another $50,000 for pain and suffering, for the stress you caused us. Aunt Carol cleared her throat. Now, Logan, let's not be greedy. Brianna is doing the right thing. She looked at me with a pitying smile. We are all just happy to put this behind us. Honey, family fights are so ugly. I didn't smile back. I didn't speak. I simply nodded to David. David opened a thick leather binder. The sound of the heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. Before we discuss any disbursements, David said, his voice smooth and dangerous, we need to clarify the nature of the relationship between Ms. Hayes and the parties present. We have prepared a document. He slid a single sheet of paper across the concrete slab toward Logan. Logan picked it up, scoffing. What is this? A confidentiality agreement? Yeah, sure. I'll sign it, as long as the check clears. It is not a confidentiality agreement, David corrected. It is a confession of guilt regarding federal wire fraud, extortion, and cyber harassment. The air left the room instantly. Logan froze. Marla blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Excuse me? Marla demanded, her voice rising to a screech. How dare you? We are here to help her. She invited us. I invited you, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was calm, detached, and utterly devoid of warmth. Because I wanted witnesses. Aunt Carol, Uncle Jerry. Thank you for coming. You need to see this. I signaled to Mr. Sterling. He connected his laptop to the large monitor on the wall. A spreadsheet appeared. It was color-coded, detailed, and devastating. This, Mr. Sterling said, using a laser pointer, is a flow of funds analysis for the last 5 years. It tracks the $800 Brianna sent to Marla Hayes on the 1st of every month. That is my money, Marla shouted. She gave it to me. And this, Sterling continued, ignoring her, tracks the cash withdrawals made from Marla's account within 48 hours of those deposits. And here, in column D, we have matched those withdrawal amounts to deposits made into a shared account held by Logan Hayes. The screen changed. It showed a bank statement. And finally, Sterling said, here are the outgoing payments from Logan's account to entities labeled Elite Sports Picks, DraftKings, and several transfers to individuals with flagged criminal records. I looked at Aunt Carol. Her face was pale. Mom, I said, you told Aunt Carol that I didn't help. You told her I let you starve. But the math shows that I sent you nearly $50,000, and 90% of it went directly to Logan's bookies. That is a lie, Logan shouted, standing up. Those are fake numbers. She hacked the bank. Sit down. Mr. Hayes, David barked. It wasn't a suggestion. Unless you want me to call the FBI agents waiting in the lobby right now. Logan sat down. He looked terrified. Now for the second matter, David said. He clicked a remote. The screen changed again. This time, it showed the email from Truth-Teller 8892, the one accusing me of embezzlement, the one sent to my investors. We traced the IP address, David explained, looking at Logan with the boredom of a predator playing with a mouse. It traces back to a mobile device registered to Logan Hayes. We also found the Venmo account linked to this handle, and most damning of all, we have the server log showing you logged into this account 5 minutes after Brianna left your house on Christmas night. David leaned forward. Tortious interference with business contracts, libel, extortion. If we file this civil suit, and if we hand this evidence to the district attorney, you are looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison, minimum. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Marla looked at Logan. For the first time in her life, she didn't look at him with adoration. She looked at him with fear. Logan, she whispered, did you send those emails? Did you try to ruin her company? I had to, Logan cried, his voice cracking. She wouldn't pay. I needed leverage. She has $14 million. Mom, she owes me. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. The voice came from the end of the table. It was Uncle Jerry. He was red in the face, sober now, and furious. You told us she stole the money, Jerry said. pointing a shaking finger at Marla. "You told us she stole a family inheritance or something. You said she was a criminal, but she has been sending you money for years? And you gave it to this junkie?" "He is not a junkie," Marla defended, but her voice was weak. "He is a gambling addict," I said, "and you are his enabler, and you both just tried to blackmail me." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I felt light. The weight of 20 years of guilt was gone. The ledger was balanced. "Here is the deal," I said, turning back to face them. "There is no $80,000 check. There is no cash. That is off the table forever." Logan made a noise like a wounded animal. "However," I continued, "I am prepared to offer a one-time alternative to prison." David slid a thick contract across the table. "This is a binding agreement," I explained. "It stipulates that Logan will enter a 6-month inpatient treatment facility for gambling addiction. The facility is in Arizona. It is secure. You cannot leave. I will pay the facility directly. Not a penny goes to you." "Arizona?" Logan gasped. "I can't go to Arizona. My life is here." "Your debt collectors are here," I corrected. "Arizona is safe, and while you are there, Mr. Sterling will negotiate a settlement with your lenders for pennies on the dollar. I will pay them off directly. But in exchange, you sign this." "What is it?" Marla asked, reaching for the paper. "It is a permanent non-disclosure agreement and a restraining order," David said. "It states that neither of you will ever mention Brianna Hayes, Northridge, or her finances publicly again. You will remove the Facebook post immediately. You will never contact her investors, and you will never ask her for money again. If you violate a single clause, the deal is void, and we prosecute the federal charges immediately." "You want to cut us off?" Marla asked, tears streaming down her face. "But we are your family. How can you be so cold?" "I am not being cold. Mom," I said, "I am being a CEO. I am cutting a loss." "I won't sign it," Logan said, crossing his arms. He was bluffing. He thought he still had power. "You won't send your own brother to jail." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrorized me for decades. I looked at the man who would have happily watched my career burn just to buy a few more weeks of action on a football game. "David," I said, "call the agents." David reached for the phone. "Wait!" Aunt Carol screamed. "Logan, you idiot! Sign the paper. She is serious. Look at her eyes. She hates you." "I don't hate him," I said softly. "I just don't care about him anymore. There is a difference." Logan looked at the phone in David's hand. He looked at the evidence on the screen. He realized, finally, that the game was rigged, and for the first time, he wasn't the one holding the controller. He grabbed the pen. He signed the paper so hard the tip tore through the page. "There," he spat, shoving it back. "Are you happy? You win. You keep your millions. I hope you choke on them." "I intend to enjoy them," I said, "but not all of them." I picked up the final document from my folder. "There is one last thing," I said, "to ensure that you never think of me as your ATM again. I want you to know where my surplus is going." I held up the document. It was a charter for a nonprofit organization. "I have established the Ridgeport Future Leaders Scholarship," I announced. "I am endowing it with $2 million of my own capital." Marla's eyes lit up. "A scholarship? Well, that is nice. Maybe your cousins." "It is a scholarship specifically for young women in Ridgeport who want to study finance and technology," I interrupted. "And the bylaws explicitly state that no member of the Hayes family, by blood or marriage, is eligible to receive a single cent." Marla's face crumbled. It was the final blow. I wasn't just keeping the money from them. I was giving it to strangers. I was giving it to the girls who were just like I used to be, girls who needed a ladder to escape families just like this one. "You are evil," Marla whispered. "No, Mom," I said. "I am free." I signaled to security. 2 guards in dark suits entered the room. "Please escort my guests out," I said. "Logan, the car for the rehab center leaves from the lobby in 10 minutes. If you are not in it, the deal is off." They stood up. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jerry wouldn't even look at Marla. They walked out first, muttering about how they had been lied to. Logan followed. His shoulders slumped, a broken man walking toward a prison of his own making. Marla was the last to leave. She stood in the doorway, looking at me, looking at the office, looking at the life she could have been part of if she had just been a mother instead of a leech. "I will never forgive you," she said. "I know," I replied, turning my chair back to the window to watch the city below. "That is why I had to save myself." The door clicked shut. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of peace. I picked up my pen, opened the next file on my desk, and went back to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below with your location and let me know what you would have done if you were in Brianna's shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help us share these stories with more people who need to hear them. See you in the next episode.